Welcome to our deep dive into the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Oh, yeah, this book is great.
It really grabbed my attention,
Yeah.
because it draws from ancient Toltec wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and offers a path to personal freedom,
Mm-hmm.
something I think we're all searching for in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
It's fascinating how Ruiz takes these ancient teachings and makes them so relevant to modern life.
yeah,
To appreciate that, it helps to understand who the Toltec were.
right,
Thousands of years ago, they flourished in southern Mexico.
right.
Not as a nation or race, but as a society of artists and scientists who dedicated themselves to preserving spiritual knowledge.
It kind of blows my mind to think about this wisdom being passed down for
Yeah.
generations, especially since it had to go underground for a while.
Right. With the arrival of European conquerors, the Toltec had to conceal their wisdom, passing it down in secret.
Wow.
Thankfully, Don Miguel Ruiz, a descendant of that lineage, chose to share these teachings with the world.
Hmm.
And the Four Agreements is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
He's written other books like The Fifth Agreement, The Mastery of Love, Prayers, and The Voice of Knowledge,
Wow.
all exploring these powerful ideas.
So there's a whole world to dive into here.
Yeah.
But for this deep dive, we're focusing on those foundational four agreements.
Okay.
One of the things that really struck me was this concept of the dream of the planet.
Hmm.
It's like we're all dreaming, not literally asleep, but creating our reality with our beliefs.
It's a profound concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The Toltec believed that we're not just passive observers.
Right.
We're active participants in shaping our reality,
Right.
and not just individually, but collectively as well.
So if we're all dreaming, what does that mean for me? Like,
Yeah.
how do I know what's real and what's part of this collective dream?
That's where the Four Agreements come in.
Okay.
They act like tools to help us break free from the limitations of that dream to see things more clearly.
Mm.
It all starts with becoming aware of our own personal dream and recognizing how it's been influenced by our upbringing, our culture, our society.
That makes sense. There are definitely beliefs I've picked up along the way that I'm starting to question.
Right.
Okay, so let's jump into the first agreement. Be impeccable with your word.
Okay.
This one really resonated with me because I've always felt that words have a certain power.
The Toltec understood this deeply.
Hmm.
They believed that words carry energy and can influence the energy field around us.
Right.
So when we speak, we're not just conveying information, we're actually creating ripples in that energy field.
Okay.
Those ripples can impact our own perceptions and experiences as well as those of others.
So gossip, negativity, even that self-critical voice in my head,
Mm-hmm.
those are all creating negative ripples.
Exactly. Ruiz compares these negative uses of words to black magic,
Wow.
highlighting the potential harm they can cause.
That puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
So being impeccable with your word is about more than just being polite.
Right.
It's about being responsible
Yeah.
with the energy we're putting out into the world.
Precisely. It's about using our words for truth,
Hmm.
for love, for self-expression, for building up rather than tearing down.
Right.
It's about aligning our words with our highest intentions.
Okay, that's a powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, I have a confession.
Okay.
Sometimes, no matter how hard I try to be positive, other people's negativity really gets to me, which leads us perfectly to the second agreement, right?
Yeah.
Don't take anything personally.
That's the beauty of how these agreements work together.
Okay.
Once you start being more mindful of your own words, you become less susceptible to the words of others.
Interesting.
That's because the second agreement reminds us that what other people say and do is a projection of their own reality,
Okay.
their own beliefs and
Because
experiences.
it's not really about me at all.
Right.
Even when it feels personal.
Even then,
Wow.
it's more like they're holding up a mirror reflecting their own inner world.
Okay.
Ruiz has this great analogy.
Okay, what is it?
He says it's like someone offering you emotional garbage. You don't have to take it. You don't have to eat it.
Yeah,
You can simply choose not to engage.
that's such a helpful image.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to remember that the next time someone tries to dump their emotional baggage on me.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
When you don't take things personally, you break free from the need to defend yourself or prove your worth.
Right.
You're no longer controlled by the opinions of others.
Okay, I'm starting to see how powerful this can be.
Yeah.
But honestly, sometimes I get tripped up by my own assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know what someone is thinking or why they're acting a certain way, and it turns out I'm totally wrong.
That's a perfect segue to the third agreement.
Right.
Don't make assumptions.
Okay.
Ruiz is very clear that assumptions are the root of countless misunderstandings and conflicts.
It's like we fill in the blanks with our own interpretations, often based on our past experiences or fears.
And those interpretations are often far from the truth.
Right.
So instead of assuming, the key is to ask questions, communicate clearly,
Got it.
seek clarification,
Mhm.
confirm your understanding.
That's a great reminder. I think this is where being impeccable with our words comes back into play, right?
Absolutely.
If we're clear and honest in our communication, it leaves less room for assumptions.
The agreements are all interconnected.
Yeah.
They work together to create a more harmonious way of being in the world.
Okay.
So now that we're being more mindful of our words, not taking things personally, and avoiding assumptions, how do we bring our best selves to the table?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It brings us to the fourth agreement, which can be a bit tricky. Always do your best. At first glance, it seems simple enough, but it also feels like a lot of pressure. Like, am I supposed to be operating at 110% all the time?
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Ruiz isn't advocating for perfectionism or pushing yourself to the point of burnout. Remember, your best is going to vary from day to day, even moment to moment.
So some days my best might be crushing it at work,
Yeah.
and other days it might be just getting to a tough emotional slump.
Exactly. It's about meeting yourself where you are, acknowledging your limitations and putting forth genuine effort from that starting point. Ruiz tells this wonderful story about a man who wants to meditate for 8 hours a day. A Buddhist master tells him, if you meditate for 8 hours a day, you will only grow tired and miss the point of meditation.
I love that. It's a reminder that pushing ourselves beyond our limits doesn't actually lead to better results. In fact, it can be counterproductive.
And it can lead to self-judgment and regret, which steal our joy and sense of accomplishment. When we truly do our best, whatever that looks like in any given moment, we free ourselves from that inner critic.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these agreements really are a path to freedom, as Ruiz describes them. But it's one thing to understand them intellectually. It's another to actually live them out in our daily lives. Any tips on how to start putting these agreements into practice?
Absolutely. Let's revisit each agreement and explore some actionable steps. Starting with the first agreement, be impeccable with your word. It's all about cultivating awareness. Notice those negative thought patterns, that self-critical voice we were talking about, and then gently challenge those thoughts.
So instead of saying, I messed that up, I might say, okay, I made a mistake. What can I learn from it?
Exactly. It's about shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion. And remember, it's not just about what we say to ourselves, it's also about how we talk about others. Before you speak, pause and ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?
That's a great filter. I can see how that simple practice could make a huge difference in my relationships. Now, what about the second agreement? I'm really curious about how to apply don't take anything personally, especially when dealing with difficult people.
This agreement can be challenging, but it's incredibly liberating. Remember, when someone is projecting negativity, it's usually coming from their own pain, their own insecurities.
So it's not really about me, even if it feels personal.
Exactly. They're acting out their own internal drama. You don't have to buy into it. You can choose to observe it without getting hooked.
Okay, but how do you do that in practice? Like if a coworker is constantly criticizing my work, it's hard not to feel hurt or defensive.
It takes practice, for sure. One helpful technique is to imagine a shield around yourself deflecting that negativity. Or you can visualize that person's words as simply noise, like traffic passing by.
Those are great visualizations. I think it also helps to remember that everyone is fighting their own battles we know nothing about.
Compassion is key. When you can see the person behind the behavior, it becomes easier to detach and not take it personally. Now, I'm sure you've experienced how assumptions can create all sorts of problems in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. I got myself into some sticky situations by assuming I knew what someone was thinking or what their motives were.
That's why the third agreement, don't make assumptions, is so crucial. The key is to replace assumptions with questions. Instead of jumping to conclusions, communicate openly and honestly.
And that ties back to being impeccable with our words, right? The clearer our communication, the less room there is for misunderstanding.
Precisely. These agreements build upon each other. Now, I think a lot of people struggle with the fourth agreement. Always do your best, because they think it means being perfect or pushing themselves to the limit.
I know I did. But I'm starting to understand that your best is not a fixed standard. It fluctuates depending on your energy levels, your circumstances, your emotional state.
Exactly. Some days your best might be writing a brilliant presentation. Other days it might be making it through a stack of emails. The point is to show up fully and give whatever effort is authentically available to you in that moment.
And to release that self-judgment if we fall short of some arbitrary standard.
Exactly. It's about self-acceptance, not self-criticism.
Okay, we've talked about how to practically apply each agreement.
Mm.
Now, how does all of this tie into that idea of creating a new dream, that heaven on earth that Ruiz talks about?
Remember that concept of domestication we discussed earlier? The idea that from a young age we're taught a whole set of rules and beliefs that may not align with our true selves.
Right, like how to behave, what to
Oh,
believe, what success looks like. All those societal expectations that get programmed into us.
exactly. And those limiting beliefs can keep us trapped in a dream of hell filled with fear, judgment, and suffering. The four agreements act as tools to break free from that domestication.
It's like deprogramming ourselves from that old software and writing our own code.
That's a great analogy. By practicing these agreements, we start to see the world through a lens that is less clouded by fear and judgment, and as we shift our perception, our reality starts to shift as well.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about actually creating a different experience of life.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our personal power, our freedom to choose how we want to perceive and experience the world. And as we do that, we start to create that new dream, that heaven on earth, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
I love that. It sounds like a pretty radical transformation. But also, like any big change, probably not without its challenges. What can we expect as we continue on this path of practicing the four agreements? We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the four agreements. In part one, we laid the foundation with the Toltec tradition and introduced those four powerful agreements.
Right.
Then in part two, we explored some practical steps for actually putting those agreements into practice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'm really curious about is how this all leads to that heaven on earth that Ruiz describes.
It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? And it's not just some far-off utopia. It's something we can create in our own lives, starting right now. But there are a few more pieces of the puzzle we need to explore.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What else do we need to know to create this heaven on earth?
Well, Ruiz emphasizes three key concepts: forgiveness, self-love, and embracing the angel of death. I know that last one might sound a bit intense, but trust me, it's incredibly powerful.
Okay, I'm willing to trust you. But let's start with forgiveness. Why is it so important on this path of personal freedom? I can see how it ties into not taking things personally, but is there more to it?
There's a lot more to it. You see, when we hold on to resentment, anger, or guilt, it's like carrying around a heavy weight. It weighs down our hearts, our minds, our spirits, and it prevents us from experiencing true freedom and joy.
It's like we're holding ourselves prisoner. I know, I've definitely felt that way at times.
Forgiveness is the key that unlocks those chains. It's about releasing the past, letting go of the hurt, and freeing ourselves to move forward.
But who are we forgiving exactly? Just others.
It's about forgiving others, absolutely.
Hmm.
But it's also, and perhaps even more importantly, about forgiving ourselves.
That self-forgiveness piece can be really tough. I think a lot of us struggle with that.
We tend to be our own harshest critics. We hold ourselves to impossible standards and then beat ourselves up when we inevitably fall short.
So how do we break free from that cycle of self-judgment? How do we actually practice forgiveness both towards ourselves and others?
It's a process, and it's not always easy. But the first step is simply acknowledging the hurt. Allow yourself to feel the emotions fully without judgment, and then consciously choose to release them.
Is there anything tangible we can do to help with that release?
There are many practices that can help. Some people find it helpful to visualize sending love and light to the person they're forgiving. Others write a letter expressing their feelings and then burn it as a symbolic act of letting go.
Those are powerful suggestions. I think it's also important to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean condoning the actions of someone who has hurt us.
Exactly. It's not about saying what they did was okay. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying that pain.
It's like a gift we give ourselves. Okay, so forgiveness is essential for releasing the past. Now, what about self-love? Where does that fit into this picture?
Self-love is the foundation of everything. It's the soil from which all other growth springs. When we love and accept ourselves fully, we become less reliant on external validation. We're less likely to take things personally, and we're more likely to speak our truth and set healthy boundaries.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill yourself up with love first before you can give it to others. But self-love can be a tricky concept. What does it actually look like in practice?
It starts with becoming aware of your self-talk. Are you constantly criticizing yourself, putting yourself down? If so, challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with affirmations. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love dearly.
So instead of saying, I'm so stupid, I might say, okay, I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm learning and growing.
Exactly. It's about treating yourself with kindness. compassion and understanding. And it's about making time for self-care. Do things that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. Take a relaxing bath, go for a walk in nature, listen to your favorite music, spend time with people who uplift you.
It's about making yourself a priority and honoring your needs. I love that. Okay, now I'm ready to tackle that last concept you mentioned, embracing the angel of death. I'm intrigued, but also a little apprehensive.
I understand. It might seem like a dark or morbid topic, but Ruiz presents it in a way that's incredibly life-affirming. He argues that when we embrace our own mortality, it paradoxically makes us feel more alive.
How does that work?
Well, when we remember that our time here is precious, it helps us prioritize what truly matters. We're less likely to waste time on things that don't bring us joy or move us closer to our goals.
We're less likely to stay stuck in jobs. We hate relationships that drain us or situations that no longer serve us.
Exactly. It gives us the courage to break free from those patterns and pursue our passions wholeheartedly. It also helps us appreciate the simple things, the everyday miracles that we often take for granted.
So it's not about dwelling on death. It's about using the awareness of our limited time to fuel our passions and live with intention.
Precisely. And when you live that way, death becomes less frightening. It becomes simply a transition, a natural part of the cycle of life.
Wow, that's a really beautiful perspective. It's like by embracing our mortality, we actually free ourselves to live more fully.
That's the paradox, and it's a powerful one.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored those four powerful agreements, the importance of forgiveness and self-love, and even the idea of embracing the angel of death. What does it all mean? What's the ultimate takeaway from the four agreements?
I think the ultimate message is that we have the power to create our own reality. We're not victims of circumstance. We have a choice in how we perceive the world, how we react to challenges, and how we show up in our lives.
It's about taking responsibility for our own happiness, our own freedom, our own heaven on earth.
Exactly. And the four agreements are like tools, like signposts, to guide us on that journey.
It's a journey of transformation, of self-discovery, of stepping into our full potential.
And it all starts with one simple decision. The decision to become aware, to question those limiting beliefs, and to choose a new way of being.
Well said. And to those listening, we encourage you to dive deeper into these Toltec teachings. Don Miguel Ruiz has written other wonderful books like The Fifth Agreement and The Mastery of Love.
And remember, you have within you the wisdom and the power to create the life you desire. Trust your intuition. Listen to your heart and embrace the journey.
That's it for our deep dive into the four agreements. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.